Hi, BookTube. I am back from vacation and just catching up with everything. I don't have a lot of actual books that I've read in the last week to report on, but I have, you know what? Not that I finished two, and I am reading one, but the real thing that I'm excited about is the library visit that's coming up at the end of the week. So I was on a scuba dive vacation in Bonaire, which is a Caribbean island, one of the ABC islands, so they say. It's a Dutch island, and that's actually our third time. This was our third time there. It's really been put on the map as a dive place. It's not an island that is beachy and has a lot of resorts. Most of the places that people stay are dive centric. So they have docks and boats, and the dives are, maybe 10 minutes away, 12 minutes. I don't think maybe 15 minutes for some, and then the unique thing about the island is that it's known for its shore dives. It's got, I don't know, at least 40, could be more, over 40 designated shore dives that are named. And most of the dive places that you stay give you a little pickup truck, and you have this drive-through tank area in the place you're staying. They give you the tanks and off you go. You can dive 2 or 3 times a day at the different dive sites, and some are more popular than others, so you have to get there early or later. And so we did a bit of both, boat dives, and then we would go out and do shore dives. So the island is inhabited by Bonaireans and also Dutch people from the Netherlands. And most of the dive crew are Bonairean. There are some that are Dutch, and they've been there a long time at the place that we go, which is called Buddy's Dive Resort. And it's a simple, wonderful place with a great staff. When I was shore diving on one of the dives, I was trying to get out of the ocean, and I came up to a spot. Most of the area is rocky or has some kind of rock before you get out of the ocean. All of this, by the way, is a protected coral reef. Could not think of the word. So it's wonderful that it's protected, and there's no fishing in that area. And so then I was getting out, and I didn't see that there were little sea urchins about this big, bigger than a golf ball, stuck in little holes in the rock the area I was trying to get out of. It was too late by the time I realized it. I was already trying to get out of the ocean, and I fell. And I ended up with the spines in my hand, in the palm of my hand, which is still there. They are still there. And at least some of them, I did get some of them out. I was able to get them out. And then in my thigh, and I have all of those out now. But we searched for the dive doctor on the island, and he used a well-known method there on the island to kill the spines that are under your skin, and that is to drip hot candle wax on all of them twice. Sometimes when you're pulling the candle wax off, the spines come out, but that didn't happen in my case. He was able to get the one out in my thigh, the one that was left. So anyway, they just work their way out, so I'm told. If you have any experience with sea urchin spines in your body, let me know. I'd love to hear your story. So when I was there, I took The Warden by Anthony Trollope. I was just so enjoying the book. I was over halfway done, and so I did finish it when I was there. I was only reading 10 minutes at night anyway. I did take another book, which was an Ann Tyler, called something like When We Were Grown-Ups or something. I tried reading it. I didn't, it just didn't connect with me. And then, so then I donated it to the free library that they have at the resort where we just trade books. I actually got a book while I was there. What is it? From the free library. The thing about those is as the week goes on, especially by Friday, people are giving up their books that they've come with, that they don't want, that they've been reading all week. Oh, it's a doozy too. I have it, I put it on the shelf. So if I remember, I'll put it in the notes. Oh, it's called Verity. Is that right? Anyway, I'll look it up. Okay. The Warden. So the Warden is, so I don't have the book anymore because I already took it back to the library, but the Warden is about Septimus Harding. He's really at the center of the book. He is a warden of an almshouse? And I'm fuzzy on those details, but it's a story about this religious organization, and there is a bishop in this story, and there is an archdeacon that's involved in the warden's work. The warden is receiving an income based on a will from the person who ran the hospital. When he died, he bequeathed a income to the warden, and he kind of acts like a pastor at times of this little church in Barchester. Then there are 12 almsmen that are getting a tiny bit of salary, a stipend, and this character in the story, a young Mr. Bold, I don't know if I have that right, but young Mr. Bold is practically ready to marry the warden's youngest daughter, Eleanor. The warden has an older daughter who is married to the archdeacon. So Bold wants to do the right thing. He is thinking that, for a number of reasons, that the will has not been interpreted correctly all these years, and that the warden should not be getting this income. He understands this is his future father-in-law, but he is acting on the letter of the law, and he wants to do the right thing. So you could imagine how this turns a lot of people upside down, and including Mr. Harding. But Harding is really the fascinating character of the story, because he can work his way through any situation, and you just don't know how he does it without getting noticeably upset by just so smartly choosing his words. I'm calling him the Ted Lasso of the mid-1800s. I really feel like that's what he is. And if you've ever watched Ted Lasso, then you know what I mean. Fascinating. This was what really drove the book for me. And plus, I was like most readers wondering what is going to happen with the warden. Is he going to get kicked out? And what does he even choose to do on his own after this scandal in the area? I just loved it. So then the follow-on, the next book, is Barchester Towers, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But this was my first Trollope. I love Trollope. I am all about this trilogy. Is it a trilogy? I think so. Okay. What else? So then when I got home, I went to the library, took the books back, and I picked up this novella called Kick the Latch by Kathryn Scanlan that I had read so much about on Bookstagram and other places, New York Times, maybe even in the New Yorker. Kathryn Scanlan is a fascinating writer. She has a very unique way of coming up with her ideas. And this one was from conversations that she had with a woman named Sonia over a few years, with the idea that she would turn the story of this horse trainer into a composite character. And the way that she chose to tell the story was through these first-person little daily vignettes, if you will. It jumps ahead. It's not actually a diary, but just these little vignettes of the main character telling her story. I'm saying main character because I don't know the main character's name. I know she gives her nickname in the beginning, but and then I think she does say her name at some point, but I don't know what it is. This felt so real in the life of a horse trainer that works for these smaller hardscrabble racetracks. She was born in Iowa. I don't know if she's still working in the Midwest during this story, but this is a man's world. It's rough. There's harassment and even some brutal things that happen to her. So it's a rough read in terms of everything that's happening to her in her daily life is physical. Everything that's happening with the horses is very physically described, but it's so visceral. It's not always an easy or definitely not a fun book to read, but it's got so much energy in it. It just drove me to read it. I read it in like 2 sittings just because I was reading it at night. I felt when I was in it, I wasn't enjoying all the time reading some of the rough life and this treatment of the horses. That's just a reality in these smaller racetracks. But the way that she's able to compare and contrast that with the higher end race horse world is eye-opening. I love horses, so this was an automatic read for me. I just love the up-closeness and rawness of her, this character that she's created, the character's voice. Loved it. I am already reserving the other book. I think it's her first book or the book before this called Aug 9 Fog. And really that refers to August 9th fog. And that book, I've heard, because I listened to an interview of her on a favorite podcast of mine. That book comes from, the idea of it comes from a diary that either she found or she was given from somewhere, and she creates a story out of it. That's all I know about Aug 9 Fog. And I've just heard from a Bookstagram friend that her short story collection, which is called something like Domestic Animals, is fantastic. I don't know, I'm touch and go on short stories, so I'm sure someday I'll read that. Then I picked up at the library, I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I have also, from that favorite podcast, which I'll link down below, I listened to an interview of Rebecca Makkai when I was in Bonaire. And I just love the way she thinks and that she thinks about writing. And it was a wonderful interview. So then I was excited to get the book, but the book just is not hooking me. It's a true crime story. It's about a woman named Bodie Kane. It's an interesting name, isn't it? And she went to a boarding school in New Hampshire. They were miserable years. And during those years, there was a murder of her former roommate, Thalia Keith, in the spring of her senior year. And though the circumstances surrounding Thalia's death and the conviction of the school's athletic trainer are hotly debated online, Bodie needs to let sleeping dogs lie. And then Bodie is invited back to the school to teach a class. And she is a true crime podcaster, I think. And she's also a film professor. And she gets dragged back and goes down a rabbit hole about Thalia's death. Is the right person in jail, things like that. I was only a little bit in, But because of the books that I have waiting for me, I just don't think this is the right book at the right time. I keep trying to read it and it just isn't sticking. So I think I will put it aside for now. Then I have already started Barchester Towers, the follow-on book to The Warden. And this picks up after the bishop has died, Dr. Grantley. And the bishop's son is actually the archdeacon. Remember that archdeacon is married to Septimus Harding's older daughter. He doesn't become bishop. They appoint a guy named Dr. Prouty. And just in the little bit that I have read, which is like how many pages? 29. I've already, Anthony Trollope has already so funnily described Mrs. Prouty. Mrs. Prouty is going to be a main character in this book, I can tell. She has a very tight rein on Dr. Prouty. There's a third character in this book called Mr. Slope, and the back of this book describes him as the oily chaplain who has designs on both Mr. Harding's daughter and the fascinating would-be femme fatale Signora Neroni. I don't even know where that's going. But this reads like a comedy. It has a lot more comedy in it, a lot more satire from the beginning. I can't talk a lot about it yet because I've only read 29 pages, so I will become more versed as I go along. But I'm just having so much fun with Trollope. And then to end with, I just wanted to, I'm going to put my laptop back on here. I wanted to talk about the long lists that have been announced since I came back, I think. They both have come out. The Women's Book Prize 2023 long list, I have it in front of me here. And I read Demon Copperhead before BookTube days, and I loved it. It uses the framework of David Copperfield. You all have probably heard all about it. It's about Damon, and his nickname is Demon, and he comes from a poverty-stricken world in Appalachia. You're following his life and you're just rooting for him the whole way. This was my first Barbara Kingsolver. I loved it. I thought maybe it was a tiny bit too long, but I think that a lot about books, so don't take anything from that. As far as the list goes, I think, like to try Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. It's very interesting. It's based on, or it's taken from a real event in the early 1950s in a French village where I don't know how many people in the village died or at least became very ill from what could have been tainted bread. But was it something that the government was doing, experimenting on? I vaguely know about this book, but it sounds fascinating. And then I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. I can't describe this book, but I've heard a lot about it, is all I can say. Memphis by Tara Stringfellow also sounds interesting. That's a family saga, and I think some of the family members need to move to Memphis and live with other family members, and about their lives growing up in Memphis. What decade? I don't know. I don't recall what decade. So I'm not going to speak any more about that. So the International Booker Prize long list also came out. And I have to say, I mean, sometimes I'm not interested in any of the books on that list. This year, though, I am. And a couple that have stuck out for me. I jumped on the my library website right away, and I to find out what books they had, what books I could get right away, what books they have on order. So let's see, A System So Magnificent It Is Blinding. I think comes from a Swedish writer. And I'm going to click on it here real quick to remind myself. Is this the triplet story? Yeah, 1989, triplets. Something happens later that brings them all together. That's a quick synopsis for you. Stillborn. Stillborn is really interesting story. It feels to me just all internal and wonderful. Guadalupe Natel, she's a Mexican writer. Alina and Laura are independent and career-driven women in their mid-30s, neither of whom have built their future around the prospect of a family. Laura makes the drastic decision of being sterilized, and Alina becomes drawn to the idea of becoming a mother. Alina gets pregnant. Laura, the one that was sterilized, becomes attached to her neighbor's son. So interesting. I don't know if either that hasn't come out yet or my library doesn't have it yet, but I won't be getting that right away. The Birthday Party. Do I have that written down here? Yeah. French, Laurent Mauvenier. My very poor French. This is about an isolated hamlet in rural France and a husband preparing for his wife's 40th birthday. But I feel like this is a thriller. There are things happening in this quiet hamlet that are seeming to disrupt their quiet life. A mystery is happening. Menacing letters, an unfamiliar car rolling up to the driveway, strangers stalking the house. I read the first couple pages of this, and the first sentence of the book is an entire page long, but it's so well written. I read that on the free sample on Amazon. And then Is Mother Dead? Definitely. That my library had that. Vigdis Hjorth, Norwegian. This is a story about an artist who comes back to her hometown after a long absence, back to Oslo. And I think her mother is dead, but she seems to be haunted by her mother. And then Boulder by Eva Baltazar, Spanish writer. I read Permafrost a few months ago and loved the writing. Baltazar is a poet and a writer, which is clear from her writing because it's just short and sharp, gets right to the point, but it's spare in the words, but piercing. And I love that kind of writing. So Permafrost was a little novella. I think this one is too. And I think I read that there's like this triptych of 3 of her novellas that are center on a single female voice. So what is Boulder about? Working as a cook on a merchant ship, a woman comes to know and love Samsa, who gives her the nickname Boulder. When the couple decide to move to Reykjavik together, Samsa announces that she wants to have a child. She is already 40 and can't bear to let the opportunity pass her by. Boulder is less enthused, but doesn't know how to say no. Interesting. I think based on how this is reading, I believe both main characters have to be women. So Samsa announces that she wants to have a child. Got it. Okay. I can't wait to read this. My library has it, and it is on its way. So lots of things coming. I might do a library haul video when I get those books. I have to do something with this email here. Okay. I might do a separate video. I'm not sure, but let me know about your picks on these lists. I'm not a really big list fan. I would say I'm more Booker oriented than the Women's Prize, but I do pay attention to the Women's Prize, and I'll be interested to see what happens on the short list. There was one more on this Women's Prize, Homesick by Jennifer Croft. If any of you have read it, I'd like to hear about that one. That's on my question mark part of the list. So let me know your thoughts about your picks on those lists. Do you even know about them? Pay attention to them. And I would love for any of you who are involved in the Trollope read-along right now. I think they're up to Dr. Thorne, which I think is the next book after Barchester Towers. How are you getting along? Is this your first experience with Trollope also? And let me know all about that. If you have any experience with sea urchins in your body, I would love also for you to share your experience with that, especially how long it took for them to actually come out. So have a good reading week, and I'm glad to be back with you all.